Welcome everyone to another episode with Lift, Lighten, and Lead with Legacy Contracts. Whether this is your first time listening or you're returning for more, we're very glad you're here. This is a space for attorneys who want more than just efficiency. You want clarity, purpose, and lasting impact in the way that you practice law, serve your clients, and lead your firm. Our mission for this platform is simple: to lift the burden, lighten the load, and help you lead with clarity. Through practical insights, thoughtful guidance, and honest conversations, we explore what it truly takes to build not just a better firm, but a better way to work. If that's the kind of growth that you're after, you're in the right place. So today we're doing a deep dive on our most recent blog that's titled The Art of Enough: Defining Success Beyond Billable Hours. And essentially we're going to start with the obvious problem, which is a lot of attorneys, or just people in general, tend to chase billable hours as the sole metric. It's like setting yourself on a treadmill. It's constantly chasing these hours, having to constantly measure input and not output. You're always looking at how many hours did you do, how much you're going to be making, what were you able to accomplish, and whether you run your invoices at the end of the month or, every week, every 2 weeks. And for a lot of people, it may feel like it's never enough. It's never enough money, never enough hours in the day, never enough time to accomplish what you need. It's just never enough. And I think out of all of the clients that I help on, a weekly to monthly basis, the areas of law in which the attorneys practice that I see this come up with a lot is for criminal law and personal injury. And it could be for various amount of reasons. I think with personal injury, it tends to be because there's a lot of deadlines that come with filing documents, when you can request documents, getting things filed, scheduling depositions. There's just a lot of deadlines for personal injury. And with, pretty much every area, there's a lot of deadlines. But I think with criminal law, depending on if your client is currently incarcerated or not, it can kind of feel like there's never enough time because you're trying to either get your client out or you're trying to make sure that their case gets resolved as soon as possible. And so the attorneys that I work with, it can seem like from time to time that they get very overwhelmed and very frustrated because it just never feels like they have enough time or they're doing as much, because the goalpost either tends to be further and further away from when they started, or it just gets to be very overwhelming, which is valid, right? Especially with criminal law, can get very, very overwhelming. And even with personal injury, depending on if you're representing the plaintiff or defendant side, can also be very overwhelming. There's a lot that comes up. You're not just dealing with your client and their expectations or the things that they're trying to, the documents they're providing you or what they're trying to give you as far as information, but it could also be, if you have co-counsel, there's things that come with co-counsel, or even if you have the opposing party, there's maybe a lot of questions that they're asking, if they're requesting a lot of information for the interrogatories. There's just a lot that can go on. So it can feel like it's just never enough when it comes to trying to log in your billable hours or just trying to get everything done. So with this reframing of defining success beyond these billable hours, we do want to look at it, differently, or seeing how we can measure success differently. So we do have some questions, just a lot of reflection points that we can give you. They will be in the show notes as well, to really just ask yourself. You can do it at the end of every day, every week, or even when you run your invoices and you're tracking your billable hours, you're doing your KPI reportings, just to have something to measure, how success can look differently outside of just looking at a billable number. And so there's 3 particular ways that we're going to give here to help you to look at measuring success differently. There's a ton of different ways, but these are the 3 that, are favorites for us here at Legacy Contracts. So the first one is measuring success by the actual impact that you're making. So if you work specifically for like criminal law, looking at the success for the impact you are making when it comes to your client, how you're able to really get them closer and closer to that end goal than where you started from. Or if you're doing, personal injury cases, how you're able to really take care of your clients, and, if they have doctor's appointments or things that they need to log. And if you're in talks with, trying to discuss what is an appropriate amount of money rewarded or compensation rewarded, measuring that success, not just on the billable hours you're putting in, but on what you're able to get for your client, what leeways you're able to make way for. The second way of looking at it is by sustainability of you as a lawyer or as an attorney, not just by your practice. So looking at how you're able to sustain how the way that you practice law and not just really how your firm runs. And the third way is looking at what you can pat yourself on the back for at the end of every day, your presence and how you're able to navigate through your work every single day, and not just, measuring it by the number of hours you put in, but just how you show up on a day-to-day basis. And once you're able to reflect on that and really just, come up with some really good answers for you to be able to look at how you can maybe do things differently to redefine how you're measuring success, you can then look at how to include it in your day-to-day practice. So you can start by setting non-billable metrics and maybe looking at different ways that you can do a 180 on how you practice law, and really include setting non-billable metrics to focus on different things, but to really also be able to ground yourself so that you're not really going hard in one area in particular. You're not like fixated on it, but you're doing other things as well to help balance out your day and push your law firm forward. You can also block out time to reflect on the outcomes that you want for the cases, or even, looking at not just for your cases, but the outcomes for your law firm in general. What are the goals that you want to hit by the end of the week for your firm? What are the things that you want to show up in your law firm when you practice on a day-to-day basis? Just looking at and taking time to reflect on your practice as a whole and how you show up as an attorney instead of just your input per case. With this reflection, you can also ask yourself how you're maintaining your boundaries. When you're showing up for your clients, are you grounding every single day? How effective are you, and how do you measure that effectiveness? And then with all of this, it's mainly just collecting data, but you can adjust your practice and how you show up for your clients accordingly. You can do a complete 180 to make sure that you feel better about what you're doing and how you're doing it at the end of every day. So what's the point, right? Why do all of this? Why does this even matter? When you look at where you're trying to get to, what legacy you want to build, how do you want your firm to be known in the world? How do you want to show up on Google? What do you want people to say when they're leaving you reviews? It all falls under the guise of building a legacy, being intentional with how you show up in the world, with how you show up with your clients, and making sure that it's consistent in every area. If some of the reviews or your Google reviews are saying, oh, the attorney was so burnt out, I didn't really hear consistently from them. But if you have referrals and the referrals are just like, oh, they worked, they did overtime for me and they went above and beyond and, this, that, and the third, that's inconsistent. And we want to make sure that each area is consistent with how we show up and how we practice law. So gathering all of this data, making sure that we're adjusting accordingly, is a way that we can continue to define success outside of just, a piece of paper. And so looking at this, it's getting you to a place of being able to define what enough means for you. At the end of every day, what does it look like to show up for yourself to say, this was a job well done? Because, when you're able to look at that for yourself, it then turns into a profitable practice for you in a sustainable manner. It also helps you to align your values and make sure that you're rooted and grounded in who you are and how you practice law. And that is it for today's episode. If this concept resonated with you, please feel free to read the full blog on our website titled The Art of Enough, Defining Success Beyond Billable Hours, or you can listen to the AI audio version on our YouTube channel. But here on this podcast, we'll delve deeper exploring the concepts, culture, and practices that help you build clarity through calm. We hope today's insights help you practice with more calm, confidence, and clarity. Remember, law firms aren't built overnight. They're built every day you choose to grow. This is Legacy Contracts, and until next time, keep leading with clarity.